Introduce yourself. Go ahead, Staci.
Thank you, Rose. Good morning, everyone. Like Rose said, my name is Staci Langel. I am with our VGM retail team. I've been with VGM for 5 years, all in VGM retail. So been here a little bit. I started as a marketing coordinator for our team, and I'm now an operations manager. So I work with our members on some of the different projects that we work with them on. But for today, we're going to talk about marketing and kind of how it's evolved and how, what it looks like now and some things that we can do in this industry, to create your marketing plan and use some different tools to have effective marketing strategies. So like I said, marketing can be, a really tricky part of the business for a lot of people. There's a lot of different channels and ways to market. Everything's constantly changing with marketing as technology evolves. So we're going to go through some of those changes, how it affects our industry, and just some steps to create a marketing plan using some of these strategies. So if we want to go to the next slide. So we've all seen this picture before of the evolution of man, but marketing has also evolved, and so the last image is incredibly true to how we live today. So we're constantly connected in more than one way. We're always doing 5 things at once. So because of that, marketing has had to evolve with us and be wherever we're at one time. So it's not just, the computer in front of us. It's our cell phones, our laptops, our, print materials, whatever the case is. So there's all these different channels that, we're being hit with constantly, and marketing has to evolve to cater to all those channels. So we're going to go to the next slide and talk about what marketing used to be. So marketing once was a business-first strategy. It was focused on what you wanted to create as a business. Communication was one-way and disruptive. Information was limited. Salespeople were trusted, and cold calling was effective. So a business-first strategy, as the slide mentions, focuses on what you wanted to create as a business. So businesses chose what products they were going to feature, how they were going to market them, what they were going to say about them. It all came to whatever the business wanted to decide. So the end user had very little, if any, say in what they wanted to see and hear, because it was a one-way communication. So the marketing went out to the customer, and there was no reciprocated message back. And when we say it's disruptive, marketing broke into what consumers were already doing and put the ad right in front of them, whether they wanted to see it or not. So the easiest examples are TV and radio commercials. Those are disruptive channels of marketing. And so information was limited. Depending on when we're talking about, the internet either didn't exist, or people had limited access to it, or it just wasn't something people used consistently. So with the internet being so limited, most people got their information from salespeople or other advertisements on what products they should buy or the features of the products, things like that. And so that's why they trusted those sources, is because they were likely the only ways that they were going to get that information on products and what's out there in the market, and have that information to make a purchase decision. So if we go to the next slide, marketing today is an audience-first strategy. Brand credibility, consistency, memorability, and authenticity, that's a lot, are all very important in marketing. Information is limitless. Mobile and online is key. Consumer advocates are becoming more popular. Interactivity changed the game. So I'll expand on a couple of these coming up, but for this slide, the 2 important ones I want to talk about are information is limitless and mobile and online is key. So they go hand in hand, like I talked about. With the internet being at our fingertips at all times, we have all of the information readily accessible. So it's important that if someone is searching for what you offer or the products that you carry, that you show up in their information search. So making sure that you have a website, that it's updated, that it's mobile friendly, and that it results when people are searching for relevant keywords. So that also goes for your Google business listing. So when you Google, grocery stores in this area, it usually comes up with like a Google Map searching, so making sure that you're listed in the Google Map searching, making sure your address is correct, your phone numbers are correct, hours, all of that stuff. And just making sure you're being noticed when people search online. So that's probably one of the biggest pieces of advice that I can give any business owner, that if you're not online, you need to be, and you need to have accurate information and make sure you're resulting for the keywords and the information that people are looking up. So if we go to the next slide, the next point that I want to dig into is the audience first strategy. So we talked about the business first strategy, where the business created what they wanted to push out. Audience first is obviously the opposite, and it's how marketing has evolved. So if anyone's ever heard of user-generated content, that's kind of the ultimate form of audience first. So it's listening to what your customers have to say and what they want to hear, and giving them the content that they're asking for, showing them the products that they're looking for, and in channels that they are using and want to see this information. And so the key to knowing where and how your customers want to see this information is through research. So, research is extremely valuable to a business when it comes to marketing, but it oftentimes is a part that gets missed or gets skipped because it is very time consuming, and you don't necessarily know where to start or what to look at. But it's so crucial to your marketing, because you can learn so much about your customers that having that data and information about your customers just lets you be able to create very strategic marketing, so that all of your efforts are worthwhile and worth the money, and your ROI is as good as it can. So we'll talk about that a little more when we get to kind of the process of creating a marketing strategy. But if we want to go to the next slide. The next one is consumer advocates. So consumer advocates is kind of like celebrity endorsements. So if you've ever seen like a Nike ad and they have the latest Olympic athletes sponsoring their products, it's kind of similar to that. Nike, Coke, Pepsi, they all do it a lot. But in recent years, we've kind of started seeing it become more everyday people becoming the face or the voice of a company or endorsing it. And it's partly because of the rise of social media. So anyone can post on Facebook about a product or about a service, or have a YouTube video talking about them using a brand or a company. So consumer advocates are such a powerful thing, because having someone that's similar to our customers talking about their product or their experience with the products that we have, it makes it more relatable. And we always talk about, peer recommendations and, customer feedback, and having quotes from customers. Those are all different kinds of consumer advocates that other customers are going to resonate with. They see, someone who wrote a quote that you posted on your website that says, my grandma fell this week and I came into so-and-so medical and they helped me out and it was so great, and it was such a positive experience. Someone else is going to see that and say, my parent is also kind of in that situation. I should go in there and hopefully they'll take care of me as well. So, and back to kind of the online piece, that's another great piece to have online, is those consumer advocates, those recommendations, the testimonials online are very important. And just having people talking about your brand online helps you reach even more people, just because, the more people are talking about you, the more you'll result in, Facebook posts or in Google searches and things like that. And it just gives you a chance to interact with your customers, and people can, comment on things, like things, do all that kind of stuff. So it kind of goes into the interactivity, which is the next slide. So if we want to go to the next slide, interactivity is huge. So you've probably heard about reputation management on Facebook or online in general, and that's extremely important today because anyone can go online and post anything they want, positive or negative. But it's our job to then respond to that. So that's the two-way dialogue that we're talking about. So, you know, both positive and negative, being able to respond to those comments and saying, thanks, I'm glad you had a great experience, or I'm sorry you didn't have a great experience. Can we call you and rectify the situation or see if we can come to some kind of a solution or whatever the case is. So having that two-way dialogue allows you to connect with your customers in a different way. It allows the consumer to be in control. So we all like to be in control of what we see, what we do. So being interactive with your customers and having you know, letting them be able to post on things and things like that lets them kind of control what they say. You can learn from them, you know, if they're always talking about one product or one thing, you know that, okay, they you know, if they're liking videos a lot about, you know, wheelchairs or walkers, you know, okay, this is something that my audience likes to see. Or if they're, you know, interacting with other products, you know how to respond to that, and you know what to keep posting and showing them so that they continue to be engaged with your product or your brand. Reusable, engaging, and shareable. This one's pretty obvious. Obviously, you know, when you post something on your website or you post something on Facebook, you can always reshare it or repost it. People can comment back and forth, and it lives on for longer than just a commercial ad that goes out there one time and then that's it. And then, like I've talked about a couple times, it provides customer insight for other advertising efforts. So you can learn a lot about what's happening and what your customers want to see just by paying attention to how they're interacting with your content. So if we want to go to the next slide, there's a couple brands that I want to talk about that do these things well, and I'll give you a few examples. So the first one, if we go to the next slide, is Nike. We've talked about it a couple times, but if anyone remembers their Better For It campaign, it focused on, Nike has always been focused on athletes and making their products better for athletes' performance, things like that. So in 2015, they started a campaign called Better For It. And this campaign was a little bit different in that it focused on empowering everyday women, not professional athletes, to reach whatever their athletic goal is. So the woman in the picture is trying to do a plank, and she's kind of struggling. So if you ever watch the video, it kind of narrates her thoughts of, oh wow, 30 more seconds, I don't know if I can do this, like push through it kind of thing. And so it's really relatable because anyone that's a beginner athlete can relate to, you know, not loving what they're doing, or going to a spin class and not knowing what they're doing, or a yoga class and looking at everyone else and thinking, you know, I can't put my foot behind my head like that. What am I doing here? So their campaign was amazing because it was so relatable that everyday people like us that aren't professional athletes can relate to it and say, you know, Nike is a brand for me because, you know, I'm like that girl in the picture. And it made them more authentic and relatable, and just kind of gave us more real people to kind of aspire to in their commercials. The next brand on the next slide is Doritos. So if you've ever seen the Doritos Super Bowl commercial, ever since 2007, Doritos actually lets, I mentioned user-generated content, Doritos lets their customers decide the storyline for their commercial. So that's user-generated content. So Doritos asks its fans to submit their own original videos or pitches for the chance to win the slot of creating the commercial. And it's been such a huge hit that they've done it ever since 2007. And they've even started doing it outside of Super Bowl ads as well. So some of their just regular commercials are user-generated videos. And so why does this work so well? And it's because no one knows the audience better than the audience. So letting their customers decide how Doritos should talk to other customers only engages the customers even more and puts the message out that everyone will resonate with. So this one on the video was, or on the slide was like a "when pigs fly," like I'll give you my Doritos when pigs fly. So that was one of their highest rated videos to date. And so it just resonates, you know, if I'm a consumer, I know what I want how I want Doritos to market it to me. And so there's going to be other consumers that feel the same way. The next one on the next slide is Coke. So we've all seen the Coke bottles with the names on it or different sayings on it. So this actually started back in 2011, and it was clearly successful because they've continued it. It's still going on now, and they've, you know, updated some of the different sayings and things on it. But they've estimated that this campaign increased their share by 4%, which doesn't seem like a lot, but if you think in the grand scheme of all of the, you know, soft drinks and stuff out there, 4% increase by just putting a couple names on Coke bottles, like that's a pretty big deal. And so again, the reason that this was working or worked for them was because of that interactivity with the brand. So who hasn't gone into a grocery store and looked through the cooler of Cokes to find one with their name on it or, you know, their friend's name on it that they can buy it and give it to them. So, you know, interactivity and being relatable again with the brand worked for Coke. So the next slide we get into how this specifically works for our industry. So these companies obviously have millions of dollars and hundreds of people dedicated to the success of their campaigns. I'm going to guess most people on this call don't have that kind of backing in their marketing department. But from what I've seen, you know, from what I've seen out in the industry, a lot of you providers already do this pretty well. So it's just kind of honing in on some of those things. So it's focusing on your customers' quality of life and their ability to enjoy everyday activities rather than on sickness. So the people that our customers don't want to be reminded that they're sick when they come in. So rather than feeling like you know, they're sick and they need to come in and see us because they have an illness or because they're getting old, we want them to feel more like they're everyone else. They're still young, they're still active, they can still do the things that they want to do in their life. So our content and our images should kind of reinforce that and just kind of being alive and being young and being active, like I said. The next one is finding some advocates. And obviously this gets a little bit sensitive just with, you know, people's health issues and things like that, but I talked a lot about, you know, testimonials are the easiest kind of consumer advocate. You know, get some customers to take a picture and have a little quote that says, you know, my experience was really great, I loved coming in, you know, I would completely recommend this to a friend, that kind of thing. Or even, you know, we've seen providers that have like a brand advocate is what they call it. And it's just someone that, you know, is regularly shopping their products or, you know, regularly uses, you know, a compression sleeve from them, and they, you know, post pictures of them, you know, running with their dog and say, you know, I got my brace at so-and-so medical and it's helped me live my life and that kind of thing. So featuring those kind of people that are everyday people doing their everyday thing, you know, is another thing that people are just going to relate to. Interact and educate. So we've kind of talked about this, you know, when people post on you know, your website or on your social media pages, interacting with them will only increase your engagement even more. Educating. This one's a little bit different, and we haven't really talked about it yet, but there's a way to market where you're not necessarily pushing your products and you're more just putting out information. So rather than every Facebook post being about, you know, I have this new product or we have this new product and this new sale, also posting things about, hey, did you know these statistics about, you know, fall prevention or whatever the case is, and being more informational and not necessarily product focused is another way that you can engage people. People will read articles or, you know, engage with different content like that as well. And then just consistent branding. This one is mostly just for, you know, brand consistency. Just makes you more recognizable. So, you know, if you're constantly putting your logo on all of your marketing pieces, you know, it all has the same color scheme, same language, things like that, then when people see it out, they're like, oh yeah, I remember that store. They, you know, I saw their ad a couple weeks ago. I should go in and talk to them. So brand consistency is also important. If we want to go to the next slide, so where do we kind of begin? This is where I'll kind of get into the process a little bit. So if we go to the next slide again, we're going to talk about each of these, but this is basically the overall picture of kind of the marketing process. So we have analyze, create a budget, make a plan, execute the plan, and then track your data. And so we represent it in a circle, obviously, because it's a constant process. You know, you're constantly analyzing your data. You're constantly looking at what you're doing, creating new content, you know, seeing how it went, and then, you know, starting it all over again. So if we go into the next slide again, analyzing your data. So there's two parts to analyzing your data. The first is looking at your market. And so this is knowing your customers and knowing your market. The first is demographics. So important demographics are age, income, gender, race, different lifestyle attributes. All of these play a role in what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, what images you're going to use, who you're going to target and how you're going to do it, and all of that. Next is looking at your competition. So not only knowing who they are and what they're doing, but what products and vendors they have, what their pricing is, how you kind of compare to them, and what makes you different from them. So obviously focusing on what makes you different will set you apart and kind of differentiate you from the competition. And it might be price, it might be service, it might be, you know, what products you have. You know, there's several different areas where you can be competitive in the market. The next two are analyzing the market through what you're currently doing. So this one can sometimes be hard to be objective. So you may have to, you know, enlist help from someone outside of your company. But how are you visible to consumers? What are they seeing? And then the last one is just what resources are available for you in your market. You know, is there a new newspaper that's out that you can utilize? Is there, you know, a new event coming up that you can have a table at, something like that. So the next slide is analyzing your business. So determining what your goal is also important to your marketing plan, and it can change how you're going to market. So you know, what channels you use or what channels you focus your energy on is going to depend on, you know, what your goal is, and your messaging and your images are kind of the same. So, and your goal is going to change with every campaign, but it's important to be mindful of what your goal is in the upcoming steps. So obviously if you're focusing on just getting your name out there in the community and being recognized, your marketing campaign is going to look different if you're talking about the new lift chair sale that you're having this weekend. So just kind of keeping that in mind in the next steps. So we can go to the next slide. Creating a budget. So this is the one that everyone hates doing because it's all about spending money. You know, everyone's pretty hesitant to spend money, but, you know, marketing is one of those areas that, you know, you always say you have to spend money to make money, and it's true for marketing. So we generally say a good rule of thumb is about 7% of your gross sales. But it's going to be different for every company and every campaign. You know, obviously, if you're a new company, you're probably going to have to spend more, just because, like I said, brand awareness, it can take a lot to, you know, have that, build up your reputation and that recognition in the community, so you might be spending more. If you're a company that's been around for 50 years, you might not have to spend as much in marketing. It can focus on some different areas. And it's important to note that it's gross sales and not revenue. So there's a little bit of a difference there, and the amount of money you'd put in would be completely different if it was revenue instead of gross sales. So 7% of gross sales is a pretty good rule of thumb to at least try to stick around. And then obviously, depending on what channels you're focusing on, the costs of those could be more or less, you know, just depending on what your goal is again. So if we go to the next slide, we'll talk about creating the marketing plan. So at the beginning of every year, or at least once a year, you should kind of plan out your marketing for the next 18 months and start big picture, and then kind of work your way into the details with the 6 months, 1 month, 1 week. And a couple reasons for this are, you know, you generally set your budgets once a year, or you should be. So you'll be able to allocate your money, your marketing dollars out that way and know kind of what you're going to spend and when. If you're planning that far ahead, you'll be more prepared and will hopefully never get to a point where you suddenly realize, like, oh shoot, I haven't done any marketing in the last 2 months, so I should probably get something going. So you'll always kind of be thinking ahead. And it makes it more manageable once you kind of break it down into those smaller pieces to be able to know, you know, what's coming down the schedule, what do I need to work on, what do I need to let my employees know, you know, to talk about when people are in the store, what's our product focus for this month, whatever the case is. So then the next slide is executing the plan. So this one can also be difficult for companies, like I said, that don't have marketing people dedicated on their team. But you know, it's also very important to have quality pieces that go out. So you know, it's obviously, you know, you have to figure out who in your market you can use as far as, you know, newspaper, TV stations, things like that. They might have people on their team that can create some of those pieces for you. You might have to hire a third-party designer if you don't have one. You know, there's a lot of options out there. So those are just some things to think about. Obviously, you have to, you know, think about cost and what different channels cost, designing the pieces, and then, you know, putting them out there. So then we'll move to the next slide, which is kind of a follow-up of this one. We talked about it a little bit. And so when you're designing your pieces, just always keep in mind kind of that positive language that we talked about. And so, you know, showing people that are living their lives doing, you know, being active, doing what they love to do, rather than focusing on, you know, people that are sick or older, things like that. Lifestyle imagery, so I have 2 examples up there. Like I said, people doing active things, living their life, things like that. Consistent branding, we talked a little bit about, so, you know, just always having your logo, your company name, contact information, all of that on all of your pieces so that people know and start recognizing you in the community. So then we'll go to the next slide. Tracking results. So there's a couple different ways that you can track results, and obviously it depends on how, what kind of marketing you're doing. So, you know, coupon codes obviously work for different print materials. There's, you know, you can look at your POS system, so depending on what system you use, you can look at some of your sales, and if your sales have increased in certain product categories that you've been marketing, or if they haven't, increased traffic. So if you have door counters, you can count the number of people that come in and out. Analytics, so a lot of online advertising, Facebook, Google, any other social media platform, they generally have provided analytics. So, you know, pulling those analytics out, looking at them, kind of making some assumptions on that. Verbal confirmation, so asking people that come in, how'd you hear about us, what brought you in today, things like that, you know. And then old-fashioned pen and paper, if you have to write down and make a checklist of how many people came in because of our direct mail piece, how many came in because a friend told them about it. You know, something even as simple and archaic as that still gives you information that says, okay, 20 people came in this week because they Googled us and our business listing came up. Maybe we should put some more effort into that. So those are just some different ways. If we go to the next slide, these are some key metrics to kind of track marketing. So ROI is a pretty obvious one, return on investment. Next is customer acquisition cost. So how much does it cost to get one customer in the door? Customer lifetime value. So how are you retaining your customers and how much are they spending throughout the lifetime of working with you? Click rates and cost per click are obviously online ones. And if you're doing like Google AdWords, they'll give you, like they calculate that for you, and you can kind of just look at the changes week by week. Net Promoter Score or customer satisfaction. So I don't know if any of you use like a Net Promoter Score, which is just like a satisfaction, you know, how many stars would you give us out of 5 kind of thing. And it's similar to, you know, like a customer feedback survey. Are you, were you satisfied with your trip here today? Did you get what you needed? That kind of thing. And then loyalty programs. That's another way to, track what your customers are doing. If you have, people in a loyalty program and you can track what they're buying and how often and then reward them for those purchases, you can look at that data as well. So then we'll go to the next slide, which basically just wraps it up. The marketing is one of those things that you have to constantly keep doing. You have to constantly be learning about what you're doing, if it's effective, if you're reaching the right audience, and how can you make it better. So just kind of keep continuing through the cycle, and hopefully you can learn and hone in on what works for your business and works for your customers. So that's all I have for you guys today. Rose, do you want to open it up if anyone has any questions or anything like that?
Yes, I just opened up everybody's line. So if anybody has any questions for Staci, this is your opportunity. Your lines are open. All right. No questions from anybody? Well, Staci, that means you did a very, very good job. Once again, I would like to thank everyone who participated in today's webinar, and especially thank Staci for her great information. And then for everybody that did join, I do have your email address. We'll go ahead and send out the presentation for you. And as a reminder, this presentation will be posted to the MAMES website. So if you didn't catch it all, I know there was a few folks that joined late. We'll get it posted by the end of the week. And so without further ado, does anybody have any last chance for a question?
No,
all right. Well,
great.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. All right.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rose.
Yep. Bye-bye.